I really love the Enduring Word commentary of it.
Okay.
Uh, did you study from that version or the one you was telling me about?
I did New Revised and then I did New Living. So
Gotcha.
no, I'll have to go back and do Enduring Word though.
Um, Definitely an interesting breakdown. I have recently just fell in love with the New Living translation, and because like I was really tied to like Amplified
Yeah.
and Message,
Uh-huh.
but I love the New Living version.
My pastor in Atlanta started he was talking about New Living Translation. Man, it's been like 2012. In Bible study, he was talking about it. And I was like, let me just go grab a New Living Translation, like the physical Bible. Because at the time I think I may have been like studying from NIV, which is fine. I try not to knock any versions. But when I started studying with New Living Translation, I was like, whoa. Because I felt like it was a Bible version that I could understand that was more like geared towards my age, even like that
Yeah,
time in my life. And I've just kind of never let it go. Like my Bible is falling apart. Like it is like the spine is no longer even connected. But I'm holding on to it. I'm not letting it go. It's good. What I love it for is when I need like a quick read on something, I'll use
hmm
this. And then when I want to dig deeper, then I'll go back to my big Bible, my uh New Revised, because I think that the perspectives are still in alignment, but you get kind of like a little bit more. And that's what I feel like everybody should be doing when they study the Bible. Don't
yeah,
just read like one version, because it's a good way to just kind of think about, okay, what's here, what's on the page, what's not on the page,
hmm
and how can I tie the two to make sense in my mind for my life.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, if you're ready, we'll get started.
Okay, let's do
All
it.
right. Hey friends, welcome back. Faith First here with my sister and partner Michelle. We have blown out past our weeks of when we originally started just thinking we
I
were going
know.
to quarantine, and we are still low key quarantining,
Yeah.
depending on where you're at. When you see this, but it's been an amazing journey. And Michelle, if you don't mind, you talk about last week's
I sure
Bible
can.
study, and we'll
Um,
jump to this week.
okay. So this month we are talking about perseverance. And so last week we actually talked about the will to finish, and it was from Philippians chapter 3, verses 12 through 14. And we spoke specifically on a pressing on and how we persevere kind of in the midst of circumstantial trials and tribulations. And so last week's talk kind of went a little bit of everywhere. I feel like we talked about a lot of different things. But our goal was just to encourage, everybody to listen, to everybody that tuned in, to really just, no matter how discouraging the journey gets, no matter how hard the race gets, to remember that you can always muster the will to finish. And, sometimes that means letting go of the past and looking on towards the future so that you can finish. And so that's what we hope you remember, that you can always finish the race no matter how hard it looks. And this week is probably building a few more bricks on excited about it. So, Miss Tori.
Yeah, so this week we're talking about when God says no to us and just what does that look like, or maybe even
Ooh,
all the emotions that we feel, and what should our posture be,
yeah.
right? And how that moves us forward towards persevering to keep going and not quitting. So this week we're going back. Well, we've been with Paul for a while now. We're rocking with
I
Paul.
know. I mean,
Um, So yeah, so Second Corinthians chapter 12, starting at verse 7.
mhm.
Um, Paul, for those who may not be aware, a brilliant man in his time. Brilliant. He went from persecuting Christians to preaching to them. The very people he talked about, he became one, which is interesting because they never really fully accepted him, right? But he was, in our time, he would be like a Bishop Jakes, right? Somebody that we admire, we revere. So here, before we get to verse 7, Paul is just talking about this vision, and he kind of goes on to say, I could talk about me, and I would be within my rights to do it,
Yeah.
right? But I rather talk about where I'm weak, right? Those things that humiliate me. And I think going back to some stuff we said about Paul before is that's what makes him so relatable, because he talks about being a human.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are in verse 7, and if it's okay with you, Michelle, we'll take it like verse by verse. If
That's
you want to
fine.
jump ahead, totally fine. But just so I just kind of don't leave anything out.
Okay.
So I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation, since you mentioned that. And that is starting at verse 7. Says, even though I have received such wonderful revelations from God, so to keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and keep me from becoming proud. Basically, right? And Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul is saying, so I don't get caught up in who you say I am, so I don't get caught up in who I think I am. God has gifted me, which I thought was
Yeah.
a crazy way of saying it, right? Like he has gifted me this thorn in my side. And just from some Bishop Jakes commentary, I we give that every week anyways. Bishop talks about that in the mindset of it being balanced, right? The God gifted Paul so that he also balanced him with this thorn. And I think we all can identify with being gifted, right, but still having struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe excelling in this area, but being really weak over here, right? Like a lot of people use, for example, are great communicators at work, but can't communicate well at home, right? Or I can do this phenomenal thing, but maybe I can't even help myself. I can help others, but I can't do it for myself. And for Paul to say that this was a gift, the first thing I thought about was perspective, right?
Yeah.
When we're talking about persevering, a lot of times things are harder because of the way we see it. And not seeing it as something that's been inflicted upon us, but God has gifted us this thorn, this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on. I'm gonna take these headphones out. Let me see if that works. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the first thing that I wanted to express is that I feel this text is relatable to everybody, because I feel like we all have a thorn.
Right.
And going back to Paul's humanness, I love the way God did a work on Paul, just in general. You already talked about, he went from being a persecutor to, a supporter, a missionary, essentially. And, what's interesting about that is that he humbled him all the way down, whittled him all the way down to his humanness. And so when we think about him talking about this thorn, I agree 100% that it's about balance. And I think more than anything, it's about dependence in that, right? Because what is our faith truly if we are not dependent on a God who is bigger than us, who is stronger than us, who is smarter than us, who is more loving and compassionate and graceful and gracious than us, right? What is our faith if it's not dependent on something bigger? So when we think about this thorn, in my mind, the thorn is a reminder of our dependence. I think that just going through the text and trying to stay on the scripture that you started us out on, I believe too that Paul was almost telling, in the version that I studied, it talked about him. The first couple of verses 1-6, is almost like Paul speaking to somebody else, because when you think about this time period and who Paul was kind of up against. Just think about the Pharisees, for example. You know, they were chest beaters. We talk about them often, how they're always beating their chest about, like, you know, well, I have these gifts and I have these talents, and God gave me the gift of speaking in tongues or the gift of you know, ministry or teaching or whatever. And Paul's like, yeah, I could boast too, but God gave me this thorn. So it's almost like saying to everyone else who's kind of saying, like, I'm so high in my righteousness, Paul is saying, no, that's not who I am. I'm not like that, right? I'm actually dependent in my righteousness. Like,
Right.
I'm nothing without this thorn, and I'm nothing without the one who gifted me. Like we talk about gifted me, the thorn. And this is a hard text, right? It's a hard text to think about, especially when you start using words like gift, because, you know, I think about people who have disabilities, right?
Mm.
Someone born with a disability. Would they say that they were gifted with a disability? You know what I mean? Or
Right.
you could even spin it for us, you know, being born Black in America, right? Is that a thorn? Could that be a thorn? And if it is, then how do we balance the heaviness of the thorn, the painfulness of the thorn, with the fact that it was gifted to us by a God who, quote unquote, loves us, you know? And I'm speaking loosely because I want us to, you know, think about this in our discussion. And I think that it helps us when we talk about life as it is, not necessarily as how we want to see it through regular glasses. Like, whatever your thorn is, it's kind of painful to say that I was gifted with it, like whatever it is. So yeah, I really believe that we all have a thorn, and I believe that this is almost like Paul's way of leveling the playing field, to say, like, yes, I have all these gifts and talents, and going back to your word, it's balanced out by this dependence because I have this thorn in my side.
Yeah. I thought about you when I was studying, where I know before you mentioned that we should pay attention to the things that God leaves out or the Bible leaves out when we're reading it, right? So we don't really know what the thorn is. We don't know. I mean, there are people who have ideas of what they believe it to be, but we don't really know for sure what it is.
Yes.
And I think that is powerful because that leaves a blank space for us to fill in and say, yep, this is my thorn, right? This is what I struggle with. This is what has been humiliating or debilitating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, had it been directly said, well, this is what it was, maybe some of us couldn't relate to it. Right. We'll say, no, God was doing it because Paul was having seizures, right? That's one of the beliefs, or that he would go blind, you know, completely.
Yeah.
But it's left blank so we can fill in whatever our thorn is, whatever gift that God has given us. And the version I was studying from, it used the word buffet, right? Ooh. That we are buffet, a messenger of Satan to buffet me. And so I was researching that, looking that up. And in the Greek word, basically what that means is like a constant punching, right? Ooh. It's that nagging. And I think for me, I could relate to that, to progressing in life, but still having this thing that is constantly punching at me, constantly, right? Like I'm doing virtual Bible study, but I'm still being punched, right? I'm doing great things seemingly to other people, but I'm still being punched, right? And that sit with me in a way because I could readily identify with that feeling because it never stops. It never ends. And again, a beautiful reminder to all of us, right? So we have Paul, this brilliant man of God, who's saying he's been constantly punched, right, by the messenger that is Satan. Yeah. But that this was also a gift from God. And I was like, for me, shifting my perspective to looking at what I feel to be my thorns as gifts. And like you said, just another reminder of, all right, I don't have it all together. I have to depend on God. right? You know, a lot of times we look at people who are gifted and who have money and maybe who have fame, but we don't really see the things that are buffeting them, Michelle.
Yeah.
You know, and which is also a reminder. I remember I had a deep admiration for Juanita Bynum when I was younger, and then I read her book, and then she talked about losing her mind, like running around her home, her neighbor naked, right? She literally lost her mind, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I don't want that. I'm good. I don't want that. You know, and we have to be you have to become, I don't want to say comfortable, but you have to not wish to be in other people's shoes, because we don't really know what they're experiencing, right? And it gives us gave me a greater appreciation just for my own little battles, right? Like, I'll take this. I don't want Michelle battles. I don't want Juanita Bynum battles. I don't want Michelle Obama battles. Like, I'm just going to work with what God has given me here, because we don't really know what people are going through, which, going back to what we're talking about, perseverance, should allow us all to persevere and know that everybody got a flaw. Everybody got something that they're struggling with. Yeah, everybody. And so, while going back to the lesson from last week, while we're running this race, know that the person next to you have something that they are also battling, right? But it goes to what you said, that it's just a reminder that we have to learn how to fully depend on God, and not in our intelligence and not in who we know and our network and our net worth, but truly depend on God. And again, for me, just the whole Buffett thing, I was like, yeah, I can relate to that, Paul.
Yeah.
I feel that, you know?
I mean, today would be a perfect example of feeling that. And it's just, I'm always intrigued at the way that the word hits me, because it's like, not only am I studying it, but I'm almost like living it every week. Our lesson is like, I have an experience with the word. And I at first I was a little bit like, okay, God, what is this? Like, I'm out here trying to do a good work, and yet I'm still being like attacked on all fronts. So what is this? And it's like, it goes back to what you said. I think that it is the constant reminder that we are always dependent on God, period. Yeah. There's not a day that goes by that we are not dependent. And you said something about gifts, about how somebody can be gifted and super talented, but also have a flaw. And it goes back to the balance we just talked about. Even if you think about it as a handicap, and I don't mean a handicap in a bad way or in a special needs way, but more so in a way that's like, what's the thing that you deal with, right? That is not all the way right. So for me, I have a patience handicap. I have a hard waiting on the Lord handicap, right? And so I know that that's my handicap. And then what happens is, while the enemy is working to exploit that handicap, I realize that the Lord is working to examine and heal that handicap. So it's almost like you're putting yourself out in the middle, in the middle of the world for everyone to see, so that God can work on you. Meanwhile, the enemy is also trying to attack you. And so I think that is why people often struggle with being so gifted and being so talented and sharing all of the other things that are going on with them, because they feel like it's opening them up for attack. And so when we think back to this thorn, I feel like if we were to recognize that everybody has one, we would struggle less as a people and as a body to really be vulnerable about what our thorn is. Because if I know Tori got a thorn, I don't have to worry so much about telling her about mine, because she has one herself. Now, yes, it may be different, but at some point we are both going to deal with a struggle. And so like, I just think about what perseverance means in from the definition side, but also what perseverance looks like in this context and in the word. And it really is simply moving forward despite my thorn.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's tough sometimes, you know?
hard. It's hard. I would argue that it's probably one of the hardest things about being in the faith, because it's subjecting yourself to like feeling all of your human experience and almost putting it so that the Lord can get the glory from it, right? Because that's essentially what this text is, you know. And I'll let you go into the scripture. I won't go too far ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Verse 8 says, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. 3 different times. You know, we talked about this before. We talked about, let's say, like the persistent widow with the judge, right? And how she kept going and kept going and kept going, and that had a positive outcome, right? Or maybe this is the opportunity for us to maybe disband the myth that we should not be repetitive in our prayers. Even though I think we've said that before,
Yeah.
that it's okay. We have Paul here who prayed 3 times.
Yeah.
Lord, take it away. Like, take it away. And then, you know, in text we talked about or mentioned Jesus in the garden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he prayed 3 times, right? God, you know, Daddy, take it away, right? Like, I am overwhelmed. And so for me, just picturing like maybe how much pain or whatever it was that Paul was feeling, how bad it had to be for him to pray 3 different times. Like, I mean, this is somebody who has been shipwrecked. This is someone who has raised the dead, right? And and I didn't read where he had to ask 3 times to raise the dead, but for himself, he's saying, Lord, take this thorn.
Yeah.
And again, just being able to identify, like, feeling that way, like, God, if you don't do nothing else, can you please do this, right? And then the next verse is not the response you're looking for, right? Okay, yeah, I'll do it. You know, it's each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me. I mean, I'll let you talk, Michelle, on that.
It's interesting because like we talked about a little bit ago, you know, when you're doing a work, when God calls you to work, whatever the work is, right? For us, it's faith first, right? And week by week, we're studying the word, and week by week, we're praying for, you know, our community and our families and our friends and whoever's scriptures, whatever the case. I know both of us are doing that together to help others. And then it gets to us and it's like, Lord, like the least you could do is handle this one little thing that I got going on so I can help your people. You know, that's what it feels like. And so for Paul to go to God 3 times and ask him to remove the thorn, and God, again, going back to what's there and what's not there, right? So verse 9 tells us that God tells Paul, my grace is sufficient. God doesn't a clear no. It's a clear no, but he doesn't say no. He says, my grace is sufficient. And so in my mind, this answer is a little bit better than a no, because it's not like God is saying, this is God saying no, but you should know that I'm going to take care of you and that my grace is going to be enough to get you through it. So it is a no, but it's like a no and. What the glimmer of hope to me that this scripture offers is that this is God talking to someone who he's trusted with so much. He's trusted with a ministry, right? And not just any ministry, but literally the builder of the early church. And he's telling him, like, hey, I know that's painful, but my grace will follow you everywhere you go. So it's like, for us, it's God saying, like, I know that this is hard. I know that you're struggling with this, but I've got you. And we talked earlier about balance, and I really feel like, I to save us from certain things. And going back to that word dependence, when we're saved from those things, do we still reverence God? When we're saved from that thing that we've been praying for, are we still as fervent in our prayer, vigilant in the spirit? And I would, as somebody who's been there, I'm gonna let you know, if God took away all of my thorns, I might be reckless out here. I believe the thorn is less about keeping us down and keeping us discouraged, and more so about empowering us in the true power, which is subjecting ourselves to God's will for our life, right?
Yeah.
Not just what we think we should do or how we think we should be, but submitting to a vision and a call that's much higher than us. And honestly, when we think about what the faith life is about, it truly is about submitting to God and fully submitting. And if you know you got a thorn in your side, that you're going to be able to make it is through God's grace, then you have no other choice but to submit and to be dependent. And I really believe that when the word tells us that,
I think we may have lost Michelle for a moment. What was?
sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah. You went out. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, just going back and over and over and over, because I'm preaching to myself just about dependence. Like that's really what it is. It's about dependence.
Yeah. Again, something you talked about, what is not mentioned when he says, my grace is sufficient for you. I'm glad he didn't say for Paul, because we would say, well, maybe because Paul was so gifted, that's why the grace was sufficient for him. But he just said it's sufficient for you. So each of us can fill in that blank and put our name there. It's sufficient for Michelle. It's sufficient for Bonita. It's sufficient for Charlene. It's sufficient for whoever needs it. It's sufficient. It's sufficient for all of us.
Yeah.
And grace just encompasses so many things, right? That's his love. It's sufficient. It's comfort. Anything we need to get through the day, he has enough for us.
Yeah.
To make it, and just it's another, like you said, another reminder that, because I'm like if I ain't had no thorn, I'd be wild, just because then I would be talking about how strong I am. Like, look at me, how strong I am. Yep. But when you know that you got issues,
yes,
that keeps you super humble. It's like, even with what we do here with Faith First and what I do with Tori Lee Speaks, and people like, oh yeah, this and that, and I'm like, nah, sis, I know me when the door is closed, like, and it keeps me dependent on God. And even things that we face that may not be a thorn that we have to deal with every day of our lives, just periodic trials, like we were talking about school starting back, right? This is a headache. And it's like, you know what? I gotta depend on you, God. Like, I don't have it all. I don't know it all. I don't have enough strength to get through this, but I'm going to totally and solely depend on you. Yes. And I think for me, I'll say this at least, it's relieving once I get to that point to say, you know what? Here you go, God. And I say once I get to that point, because to be honest, a lot of times I'm still trying to do it on my own. Like, you know what? I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna figure this out. And then I realize, you know what? I don't have to know everything. I don't have to have it all figured out. I can rest and depend on God.
Yeah.
And it's so freeing from believing that I have to have it all. I have to know it all. Like, no, like I'm weak. I'm weak in this area, and I depend on God for that. Like he has to. We have to know that first. Recognize that we're insufficient, right? And if you don't
Ooh.
recognize that you're insufficient, that you need something, then
Yeah.
it will be hard for you to accept that there's a greater power beyond yourself that can carry you through stuff that you couldn't walk through on your own.
Yeah.
And again, for anybody who's listening, I promise you, it's so freeing when you rest in Him. And I'm talking to me. When you rest in Him and know that whatever you need, God has given you enough for that day.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about this all the time. Just daily provisions, not getting ahead of God day by day. I know you said this right before we went live. Not a week from now, but today. God, give me the grace to get through today. And once you realize that's all you need, like I said, it's just so freeing, Michelle.
Yeah. It definitely is freeing. And I think that, we must and we have to reiterate that this isn't something that you get overnight, right? You probably won't walk away from this study saying, okay, Lord, I know I got this thorn, but we're gonna be all right, right? That's probably not gonna happen. But the more that you read this text and the more that you understand that we all have thorns and that your thorn may not look like my thorn, but we're all still dependent, it is freeing. And I believe, Tori, that we as believers and as Christians and anybody with any amount of faith, oftentimes we put pressure on ourselves because we feel like, okay, well, I'm serving this big God, then surely I should be able to handle this. And God is actually saying, I am the big God, so let me be the big God. Stop trying to be something to yourself that you cannot be.
Yeah.
And I know that I struggle with that I often feel like, the scriptures start playing in my head, right? Faith without works. Okay, Michelle, so get to work. And it's like, I'm constantly trying to find balance between what's my work and what is God's work.
Yeah.
And so it always pushes me to that question, what can I control? Honestly, very little. So once I've checked off all the things on the list, slide the list over to God. And I think that that's something that we have to do actively. And that is a daily work and a minute by minute work, because then it releases you. And to your point, Tori, it frees you to say, okay, God, I've done all that I can do. Now I need you to do it. I need you to handle it. I need you to work it out. I need you to fix it. I need you to do whatever it's going to take for me to get to the point that you want me to be. But I have exhausted all of my resources. I am insufficient. And I believe, like we said, like the reason that Paul even brings up boasting here is because he knew that if he did boast, he would probably be broken down even further. And it's like, I can't boast about anything. I can't take credit for any of the things I've accomplished in this life. At some point along the way, God has helped me. Somebody else has helped me. My parents have helped me. My sister has helped me. My husband has helped me. I can't boast about anything. The only thing I can boast about is God, right? Because the glory belongs to Him. And when you realize that, you realize like, okay, I don't have to do that much then. I don't have to be out here doing the most. I can let God do the most. I can do the least, and He get the glory. Like, to me, that's a pretty good deal. If God is so big and so great and so wonderful that He's always working on our behalf, we don't have to worry about all those little small details the way we do. And I will argue that we stress out the most about the things that God has to do, not the things that we have to do, right? We're so consumed by the things that God has to work out that we can't even focus on the things that we need to work out.
Yeah. Procrastinating on your own stuff and worrying about what God's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I can definitely identify with that. But while you were talking, something came across my mind. I want to ask you this: do you think possibly that we struggle with just like dependency because we live in a society or a culture that talks about being self-made, right? Like
Oh,
it's
100%.
I got it out the mud, it's all me.
Yeah.
Even the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, that's you supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's why, at least in the US, I would say I can speak for us, maybe that's why we struggle because we are given images of people who we believe are doing it on their own, right? But we don't always get to see their thorn and what they are battling privately until it hits the tabloids or somebody goes and does a random interview or something wild, but I want your thoughts on that. Do you think it's because we live in a culture that touts self-made, right, over dependency? Because for us, dependency is seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I think there are many factors, right, that contribute to this whole notion that we have to do it ourselves and we have to be independent. And I definitely believe that there is a stigma around dependence, right? And even submission, if you want to lend that word, right? Especially when you talk about submitting to God. And I believe that society's pressures for us to do it all ourselves, for us to be all things to everybody. I believe that's definitely one of the many factors. It's our flesh, right? Because the flesh wants to live to live in a way that is not accountable to anything else, right? Not accountable to God, not accountable to the spirit, not accountable to anything. The flesh wants to do what the flesh wants to do. And so if I have a vision for my life, and I want to see it through, then I'm going to convince myself that by any means necessary, I can get this done. And I do believe that, there's like that aspect, and then the aspect of societal pressure that puts us in the rat race, right? You think about how many people are declaring, I'm going to be a millionaire and I'm going to be a billionaire and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it's like, I powerful visions for our lives, but I always caution people not to build a vision for your life that God has not signed off on. Because when you build a vision and it hasn't been inspired by the author and finisher of your faith, because there have been aspects and times in my life where I've wanted things more than anything, right? I wanted a certain career path, or I wanted to work in a certain profession. And I'm not saying necessarily that God has told me no on those things, but he's definitely told me not yet. And I wasted a lot of years assuming that God's not yet was a sign for me to work harder, to run myself in the ground towards something that God was like, not yet. This is going to have to be a dream deferred. And so as we think about that dependence, I think we should not only be dependent on God to get us through the hard times, but we should be dependent to give us the vision to see these things through. And so this just goes back to reiterating the importance of staying connected and having a real relationship with, because otherwise you just out here making decisions. And going back to something, you mentioned earlier about school, I know that there are lots of parents, lots of teachers, lots of educators, administrators, staff, everybody having this back to school in person. And, my only suggestion is that you really seek God to know and understand what fits best for you and your children and your life and your business and your family. Because otherwise, if you get out here and you listen completely to the science or completely to the news or completely to the teachers or whoever, you might miss what God is doing for you and your family and your life and your business in this season. So, you know, again, going back to that moment to get to the next step is its dependence for the direction and for the vision and for the guidance along the way. Don't wait until it gets hard for you to go and seek God. Seek him constantly.
Yeah. Something that struck a chord with me is I know I used to deal with thinking that because I was weak in certain areas, that this is why God can't use me, right? And I found that it is because I have those weaknesses
Yes.
is why he uses me, right?
Yeah.
And so we think that we have to be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to have this strength that we can exude. And really, God just wants you to come to him weak, insufficient. Like, I'm gonna eat. Like, God, I need you to fill me up. And for anybody that's listening, don't think because you have certain weaknesses that this excludes you from being used by God. In fact, we see most of the people, Paul, a killer, right? That God uses in the Bible were people who were flawed, who had weaknesses, and that he doesn't use us because of, right? He uses us in spite of.
Yes.
And in fact, those individuals are all the more inspiring, right? All the more reason why we admire them, because we are able to see, like, dang, like they really are living with this. They're having to overcome this. So, like I said, for anyone who's listening, don't downplay yourself because you got a weakness. Like, go give it to God and be like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. You know, like, what we gonna do?
Yeah.
And know that God can use you even with the thorn in your side, right? Even with your weakness. That doesn't mean that you have to stop running the race. In fact, this is the time you pick up speed, right? It's the opposite of what we are accustomed to with our natural eyes. It's the complete opposite. In fact, everything about God is the opposite of what we see or believe, right? With our natural eyes on a day-to-day basis. That is all the more the time to run when that thorn is pricking, when it's hurting, when you feel like I can't go anymore, when you're feeling like I'm overwhelmed. That is all the more the reason, because there are other people up ahead.
Yes.
That need to know about your thorn. Because they on the side watching you run, and they need you to pull over and be like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with.
Right.
You can make it too. And like you said earlier, we have to get back to a place where we can be more transparent, right? But social media, like I said, we said before, has put us in a place where we can be cruel and vicious, right? But that's where we have to trust God to say, okay, if I open up and I reveal this, that you're going to carry me anyways. Because what happens a lot of times, Michelle, we see this with usually, very well-known preachers, right? They may not necessarily come out and tell us this is our weakness, but it gets exposed.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think that way it's much worse. But so either we can be transparent or God can expose it. And a lot of times we see stuff and we go, I can't believe such and such is like this, forgetting that you have a thorn that you're running this race with. And we touched on this last week and a few weeks earlier, just about us not being judgmental as believers, knowing that because like you said earlier, your thorn looks different from mine, it's still a thorn.
Yep.
And well, this is higher, this is lower. It's still a thorn. But know that God can use you with that thorn. And like I said, it was just a reminder for me, like, hey, Tori, I love the fact that you got this weakness, because now you really got to lean on me.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it on your own. You know, And so, again, just a reminder that God can still use you.
Mm-hmm.
Because we talk about this all the time. We are so hard on ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves, and we
Lord.
don't persevere. We quit. We stop because we go, man, I got the storm.
Mm-hmm.
But what God is saying, don't stop, don't quit. Just depend on me.
Lean on me. Lean on me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, when you little, you hear them sing them songs in church. He won't let you fall. But like when you get older, you realize, like, you know what? I need to lean right now, Lord.
Oh, gosh, yes. Okay, hold on 1 second because I need to grab my computer charger.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, this conversation is too good for me to let my computer die. So what I was gonna say was when you brought up having a thorn, it made me think about Moses. And I mean, the examples are all throughout the Bible, but I remember I was going over Moses' story with kids in teenager church a few years ago, and we talked about Moses having a speech impediment, right? And a lot of people don't realize that Moses had a speech impediment. And in my mind, the reason that it's important that Moses had a speech impediment was because what he was called to do for Egypt, right? He was called to go in front of Pharaoh and demand that Pharaoh let these people go. Now think about what it means to have a speech impediment. Let's say you have a stuttering problem. Standing in front of the most powerful person in the land, telling them, I need you to free these people with a stutter. Could you imagine? I can't imagine. I can't imagine standing in front of or talking right now with, a speech impediment because I get nervous about my own voice. So I just think about how God uses us with the thorn. And that is the point in my mind, because it's all about bringing us closer to him and bringing others closer to him. And I do believe that at the end of the day, there are so many people who don't know God and don't care to know God because they feel like he expects perfection from them. And that is the last thing on the list. He does not need or want perfection from you. He wants you, all of you, flaws and all. And I feel like that we just need to continue to drive that home as we are talking to other people about God, about this God that we, say is so loving and so kind and so gracious. That means that we have to be loving and kind and gracious and accepting and non-judgmental, because if we are a reflection of the God we serve, what are we reflecting to his? And when I think about having a thorn, I want everybody to know that I have a thorn, that I still wake up every day and I am flawed and I am imperfect. Yet here I am with my Bible, my non-memorizing scripture self, sitting here talking and discussing this God that I know only from experience, not just because of what I've read, not just because of the church that I've attended or the Sunday schools that I've attended, but because I know him for myself. And I think that's so important to say, that we all got a thorn. We all have one. I don't care who it is. We all have a thorn. Some of us, our thorns may be visible. Others of us, our thorns might be hidden. But at the end of the day, sooner or later, it's going to become exposed. And so I believe that, Paul's reflection on this is really more so to make us comfortable with the thorn. Not comfortable physically, maybe, but comfortable knowing that we are not alone in having a thorn. And like you said, Tori, about the race, knowing that there are going to be other people who will sit on the sidelines because they have a thorn, and we got to somehow pull them in. We got to pull them into the race because they need to be running, and we all need to be doing this race together so that we can get to that prize we talked about last week.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say about the thorn before we go on to verse 10 is this. When I was studying in the Enduring Word, they listed it out like this, that when Paul was praying, that it affected him in 3 different ways, which I think affects us. Physically, he had a thorn, right? Mentally, because it tells us that Satan was the messenger, right? That constant buffeting at him, right? That's physical, mental exhaustion. And
Yep.
spiritually, it can be spiritually exhausting when we're asking God to do something for us
Ooh.
that what I wrote in the newsletter today, a good ask, right? God, I'm asking you for something that is good.
Yeah.
Why aren't you moving? I'm asking you to heal somebody. This is not even a selfish prayer, what I'm asking for. This ain't even about me,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm asking you to heal them. Do it for them, or do it, it's a good purpose behind it. This ain't even about me. And still getting a no, or just the answer you just were not looking for,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, it's not a definite, like, well, nah, but it's like, well, our grace is sufficient. You can handle it, right? And that's tough when, we're dealing with loved ones who are dying, and we are fervently praying, God, you are a healer. You can do it, right? And then you have to close the casket on a loved one. Like it is physically, mentally, and can be spiritually exhausting.
Yep.
And I think you and I, we highlight that often, at least we try to, right? That we are a complete individual. We understand, about mental health and things like that. We are a complete person. Here's the thing. God knows that we are a complete person, right? And so he knows that you have this physical thing that is ailing you, that it is impacting you mentally and even spiritually, but yet he's still saying, my grace is sufficient, right? I know you feel weak and torn down in all of these areas at some point, no matter what it is that's bothering you. And you're not asking for something that's bad.
Mm.
You're not asking for something that's selfish, but you've been overruled.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part is, that we serve a God who is touched. He can feel, right? He knows, like he sees our tears, he feels our pain, right? When Christ came down in a mortal body, right? He cried, he wept. He knows.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes I feel like people think that we serve a God who doesn't understand. But he understands that this is a battle, a warfare, right? That is physically, mentally, and can be spiritually exhausting. And I think we have to, as a body, and I'm talking to myself too, even when we talk to ourselves, at encouraging ourselves on each of those levels. And sometimes it's just physical.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just mental. But mostly all the time it's spiritual.
Yeah.
It's gonna be spiritual, or all three.
Yeah.
Right? And speaking to each part of a person. Because God does. He deals with us as a whole person. I tell people all the time, like, God is concerned about even the smallest things about you. The Bible tells us that he knows the number of hairs on our head. Like, this is a detailed God, right? So why would he not be concerned with what you think is, well, he ain't really thinking about that? Now, the answer is still no.
Right.
But he cares, and he's telling us that he's given us everything we need to not just survive it, right? But to come out and be better because of it.
Yeah. I think that when we get told no, we often assume it's because of something we've done or not done, or we feel like, okay, God must be telling me no because I don't deserve it, or the case. And I have struggled with that, and what I've resolved to is that God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And I think that sometimes in our smallness, in our humanness, we ask him for things, assuming that thing is the thing that he wants for us. And that's not always the case. And we have to be okay with, you just have to be okay with knowing that he knows best. Now, it might not feel good to realize that his no or his not yet is what's best. But at the end of the day, it's what's best for us. He always is thinking about what's best for us. He tells us, I know the plans I have for you, right? Yeah. I know the plans. You don't know all the plans. So don't just sit here and assume that because I'm telling you no, that I'm trying to punish you, or I'm trying to discipline you, or I'm trying to keep you away from something. Sometimes that's the case, but that's not always the case. And so, you know, instead of trying to clock God or trying to keep up with the reason he says no, or trying to change his mind, submit to his will. And that means that I got to be okay with that no. It's hard. Like I recall like basically falling into depression because of a no I got. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I can see why he told me no. I can see why he said not, why he delayed a lot of things, because I wasn't ready. But it first took me saying, okay, God, I guess I got to be all right with you saying no. And so I would just encourage you, if you've been asking God for something and he's been telling you no, to just be okay with the no and continue to realize that he knows. So like you get the N-O, but he also knows K-N-O-W-S. He knows what's best for you. We don't always know. And sometimes what we see in front of us is not exactly what's all the way up ahead, right? Our lives this year look completely different than they did last year. And God, hopefully they'll look completely different next year. You know what I mean? So what you want in the moment right here, this no may feel like punishment. It may feel like the thorn, but just know that God has something more. He has something better. He has something better. He always has something better. Always, always, always. Like always, exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask or think. And like, this is when you have to press into those promises. Like Tori and I always encourage, you know, go into the Bible, Google, find you some scriptures, at least 3 that you can pray over your life, because otherwise you will get lost in the sauce and be tossing all over the place because you can't figure out, you have nothing to anchor yourself to. And I believe that it's only because that I've been able to find, you know, a few scriptures that I can like lean on and depend on to hold on to, because it's, y'all, life is crazy and it's hard and it's a struggle. I don't care how much scripture you know, like it's a struggle. You have to have something to hold on to. So just become okay with knowing that the no comes from a place of love. It comes from a place of care, and it comes from a place that's higher. He can see farther.
Yeah, it froze for a second.
Okay.
You said like a lot of good stuff there, and like you said, just find those 3 scriptures for those days where you can't get out of bed.
Yeah, world.
Because I'm talking about me now, Michelle. You in bed and you just like, yeah, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And find those scriptures that can speak to you, because they're different for each of us. Like what I may feel fires me up, you might be like, oh, okay. I mean, that's nice.
Yeah.
You know, finding those scriptures that speak to you, those things that, and you gotta go and dig them up before you get down. Because you know, it's something you gotta, and not that you have to memorize it, because we talk about Michelle and her memory all the time. She's like, I don't remember Bible verses.
So
I'm all right. I'm not that, you know, write them down. Post them in your bathroom, right? Like we do talk about positive affirmations, and there are a lot of positive affirmations you can speak of yourself from the Bible.
Yep.
And when you have those days where you don't want to get up, you got to remind yourself that, you know what, I know this is tough, but God has given me everything I need to get through today.
Yep.
He's given me enough strength. There's a verse that says he's given me enough strength for today. For today. Now, when tomorrow I get here, when I push back the sheets, we'll worry about that then. But he's given me enough for today. Find those Bible verses and utilize them. The last verse we have is 10. Paul says, that's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Michelle, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm still learning how to take pleasure in the insults I can deal like, okay, I got flaws, but the insults, the hardships, and
Yeah.
the persecutions and the troubles, right? And if we be real, you talked about this, I think, last week, in the Western world, most of the time, we're not really experiencing real hardships, right? Like our other brothers and sisters across the ocean, where like they will kill you
Yeah.
for talking about, Jesus Christ, talking
Mhm.
about that. So maybe not so much that, but I'm definitely working on the insults and the
You-
hardships because I'm like, I ain't even bothering nobody.
Yeah.
Like why me,
Yeah.
right? But just trying to be like him and taking pleasure in it. Like I said in the beginning, shifting my perspective, shifting your perspective from this being something that is awful to it being this is a gift from God, changes the entire thing.
Yeah.
When I don't see myself as someone who's being inflicted with pain, but rather God is trusting me with this gift to still go and do great things for Him, right? It's about shifting our perspective so we can finish.
Mhm.
Because if we just see it as, dang, they just beating on me, I just, I bump it, I'm
Yeah,
out.
you be like,
Okay, y'all can have this. I didn't even ask for this. Then we'll never finish. We'll never get to the place where God wants us to be. And truth be told, we'll never get to the places that we want.
yeah.
Because we gotta mark off the things He wants us to do a lot of times so we can ever get to what we actually want.
Yeah.
Because in what we want, we gotta go through what God has, right? And we won't get there if we keep quitting because we're experiencing hardships. If we keep quitting because people are insulting us, if we keep quitting because, man, I'm weak over here, we will never get to where God wants us to be
Yeah.
if we just quit. If we don't see it as a gift.
Mhm. Yeah. I think I don't know where this came, I don't know where this like thought came from, but I was thinking about, like the corny superhero movies and like, there'll be like a fight scene and they'll be fighting it almost kind of like in slow motion, and then the like star of the movie will kind of like pause because they like recognize that that person was about to attack them from behind or something like that. And I
Yeah.
kind of think about that in this sense that like when we are facing these attacks, often our flesh becomes consumed, and we become consumed by the attack in the moment instead of recognizing, like flipping a switch in our brain to say, okay, I knew that was coming. I knew that when I started this work, you were going to try me. And I'm not talking about you as in the person or who it is, right? At the end of the day, the people who hate on you, the people who are attacking you, the people who are persecuting you and judging you, honestly, they don't realize that they're on a mission for another kind of spirit, right?
Right.
It's not about who they are, but it's about who you are and what's inside of you and what God has placed in you. So when you start to realize, and like you said, Tori, seeing the perspective from a different level, you realize like this has nothing to do with who I am as a person. This is about what I'm called to do. And so I realized that I'm gonna have to address you the same way that you're trying to attack me. And that's with the word, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? The enemy, our enemy does not like to see God get the glory out of our lives. So when we go from doing something in the streets to doing something in the church, right? Of course, the attacks are going to come because the enemy is always trying to steal you, steal your testimony, honestly, truly. And he wants you to stay out there, over there, where you're out of the will of God, where you're not doing what God has called you to do, where you're not doing the work that God has called you to. That's where he wants you. So of course the persecution and the insults are gonna come. And if he can't get you out of the will, then he'll just discourage you from even staying there, right? He'll just say, okay, I'm gonna just discourage you to the point where you quit. And that's all the more reason for us to lean in. So when we talk about pressing and we talk about perseverance, we also have to realize that all of these things that Paul is talking about, at some point we're going to get them. right? So Tori, you talked about insults. People may be talking about me, and if they are, then that's fine. I'm glad that I don't necessarily hear it. I'm sure they do. But mine is definitely more so on the on the hardship side. It's like personal hardships. And so, you know, when I am able to kind of put a pause on my flesh and really connect in the spirit, I realize it's less about the attack and more so. And so again, going back to my crazy little analogy about, you know,
no, it's great. It's a great analogy.
Attack is really getting to the point where you can see the attack before it comes, or even if you see it after it comes, learning how to fight it. Because ultimately, right? When I am weak, I am strong. And the reason that you go from weakness to strength is because the spirit consumes you. It's not me by myself doing this. It's the spirit. That's why you should constantly be trying to plug into the spirit and praying the spirit over you so that you can be in connection and in alignment with it. That's what gets you out of. That's what keeps you going when you feel like giving up. That's what allows you to peel back those covers and say, Lord, I don't know where the strength coming from, but I'm praying that your spirit would consume me so that I can do what I need to do today. That's what this is about. It's not about taking the attacks away altogether. It's not that at all. It's about saying, in spite of the attacks, I'm going to keep pressing on. I'm going to keep doing this work. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep being courageous. I'm going to keep doing what I'm supposed to do.
While you were talking, I thought about something as far as like when coming up in church, right? We hear people give these testimonies like, when I came to God, God took the taste out my mouth, cigarette to like whatever. He took it, right? So it creates for a lot of us a false sense of, yes, take it all away, you know. Yep. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen for some people. I'm just gonna say it hasn't happened for me.
Yeah.
So like I'm more of aligned with the ideas that God doesn't take anything away from us. He gives us power over it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can slip back. You know, he's a gentleman. He don't force anything on you. You can slip back in whatever you want to slip back in. So for me, again, growing up, I was like, well, why he just took it away from me?
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't work like that for everyone. Let's say like that. It doesn't work that way for everyone. So I love what you said about how it's not about the attacks. It's not even really about you. It's about what you have been called to do. Like, I want to cash app you, then, Michelle. I was like, that's it. That is it. But it goes back to the way we see ourselves, pride, thinking like, it's not me. It's me. And it's not even really about you. It's about what you've been called to do. If I can stop you from doing what you were called to do, from freeing so many other people, I got it.
Yeah.
If I can get you to keep your mouth closed because you feel like you ain't qualified to talk, I got you.
Listen. Yeah.
But it ain't about you. Like when you said that, like something in me was like, yes. it's a reminder for me. Like, all right, Tori, it's not about you. It's about what you've been called to do. And the enemy will not stop by any means, right? You going to bed, you tired, you sleep. But he plotting. All right. I didn't, like you said, I didn't catch you over here, so I'm gonna catch you over there. But like you said, you know, is going back to that word I feel like for the night is dependency. Knowing that, all these things are coming, but I am gonna totally and solely rely on God. Put my faith and my trust in Him, and that's something that we have to renew and do every day. Because by the end of the day, it's worn out. You know, I gotta kick this up again. You know, all right, God, I'm trusting you. This is a fresh start. Because yesterday is depleted. And like you said, ultimately knowing that it's not about you. That thorn in Paul's side was not about him. It was not about him. And imagine if he was like, no, I can't do it. I can't help y'all because I can't help me. Which I think challenges the idea, because we have a habit of saying that, how you gonna tell me about me and you can't do it for you? Right. It happens all the time.
It sure does.
Sure. Like, we see this in sports. There are great coaches who can't play. It's just is what it is. I probably can't help you through your marital issues, but I suck in my own.
Yeah.
Right. I can pray you through on this, but I'm struggling and I'm battling with that. And I think going back to judging and things like that is not looking at people and going, well, you can't tell me nothing. Everybody has something they can offer, knowing that everybody, like we talked about the body of Christ, is valuable.
Yes.
Right. Everybody is valuable. Everyone's calling is important.
Mm-hmm.
You may not see it as being valuable or important, but it is important. You may not see what you're doing every day as important, but you are important. What you're doing is important.
Yes.
Even if you're placed to just to affect one person, that is important. I think Tupac said he may not change the world, but he might ignite or spark the mind that will. Right? You may not be the one to go and heal thousands, but you may touch the life of someone who will go and do that.
Yeah.
And that is equally as important that you gave them the encouragement to keep going, to not quit, because you were transparent and said, you know what, this is where I struggle. Right? Yeah. You gave them just enough to either start the race or to keep going. And we have to persevere no matter how hard it is, no matter how much pain we're in, no matter how humiliating it can be. We just have to keep going because what you said, Michelle, is bigger than you. And that by itself is powerful. It's way bigger than you.
It is. I think we're all motivated by different things, but I would just say to anybody listening or anybody who will listen in the future is just always remember that somebody is watching you. And I think that sometimes, Tori, we take that for granted because we say, like, some of us are like, well, who would be watching me, or why would somebody want to look up to me? But you would be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be surprised who's watching you, who's listening to you, who's looking at you, who's patterning their lives after you because you have something, right? There's a light that shines on you, around you. Everyone around you shines because of you. So just know that someone is always watching. And I don't care. It's not about your education. It's not about what family you came from. It's not about how much money you make, where you live. It's about you. And it's about knowing that you are being watched, and that comes with responsibility. So like we talk about transparency, don't be so proud not to look like you. Sometimes we can be so proud that we don't want to look bad. So we don't share our testimony. We aren't transparent because we don't want people to see, like, yeah, you see this, all the mess I went through to get to that. No, show me the mess. I'll tell you about my mess. I want you to see what I went through to get to this point. I want you to know that I'm flawed. I want you to know that I'm imperfect. I want you to know that I cuss sometimes, right? I want you to know that I'm that, because I want you to feel good about what your journey is and how God is moving in your life, because it might not look the same way as it does for me. And so I just think when we talk about perseverance, is even persevering through those moments and what we do doesn't matter, and our being here doesn't matter. That is an attack from the enemy, and we cast that down here today and every day forward. You are here for a purpose. You are here for a purpose, and I need you, Tori, and I need you, like we said last week, to keep pressing on towards the purpose. Because I'm telling you, when you hit it, when you get there, it's gonna be like you like you know how you playing video games and you like pass a level and you get all the little celebration at the end. That's what's gonna happen, right? Is like it's like God level you up so far that you're gonna be like, whoa, how did I even get here? How did I get through that? I feel like this year alone is a setup for something in like unimaginable, because of all of the suffering that we are seeing right now. I know for a fact that if God lets us see the end of this, it's gonna be like, it's just gonna blow minds talking about exceedingly and abundantly, I want you to declare that and pray that over your life, because I don't believe that God ever allows us to suffer such hardships without giving us a reward on the end. And so,
Balance.
yes, that balance. And that's what I would just encourage you. If you feel in that thorn, if you feel like it's pressing in, if you feel like it's getting almost unbearable, just hold on a little while longer. Please hold on a little while longer. It's going to get better. I promise it will. I promise it will.
It will. And
That's
know
all.
that and know that in your weakness, that is when God
Yeah.
can show up and show out and show you who He is and show everybody else who He is. God does unbelievable things, right? In our weakness. That is the real thing there. So tonight's Bible study was good. Thank you so much, Michelle. As always, to everybody else who's watching, at least hold on till Friday. So we have our prayer call at 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard. Join us. The number is always listed in Faith First. Michelle and I tend to post it. If you don't see it, inbox us, let us know.
Yeah.
But as always, we love you guys. We're praying for you. We're persevering. We're running this race right alongside you. And know that more than anything, like Paul, like God doesn't need you. It is when you realize that you're insufficient and that you're weak, that He can show up and He can be the God that we know that He is.
Yes.
And that's that. So, Michelle, any words before we say goodnight?
No, just I needed this, and I'm glad that we have this because it was needed today.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely needed it. Y'all have a good night. We love y'all, and talk to you guys on Friday.
Good night.